iridology is the practice of reading your iris. And for those of you who don't know, the iris is the colored part of your eye. And you can tell so much about a person physically, as well as emotionally and energetically, which is what I love to tie in with my clients. It isn't widely practiced or even widely known about, which is unfortunate. And I've only come across a couple of naturopathic schools that actually teach it, and normally it's an additional certification, which is what I've gone through. So by being able to read the iris based off of the nerve endings that connect the rest of your body and then end up in your iris, we can determine what's going on in individual organs, individual systems, the tissues as a whole. So it's a really effective way to read what's happening without having to do needles or poop scoops. So I normally say it's like functional labs without needles and poop scoops, because we can see so much from genetic predispositions to the current function of your detoxification system. Do you have leaky gut? Do you have parasites? Is heavy metals present in your brain? We can see your emotional tendencies, your energetic patterns. There's so much to uncover, and that's why it's become a staple in my practice.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so into it because I feel, from personal experience as a client and also just when I worked as a nutritionist, labs are so limited, and
Mm-hmm.
you could have a lab done like every 3 months for 10 years and still not pick up on parasites. Like, people don't realize how limited it is. And I'm really loving all these different modalities that are like kind of coming into my ecosystem around like, how do we bypass that? So like with frequency testing, I was having this conversation with my friend earlier, and look, I'm not telling anybody to do this, but I'm like, my spirit guides have always been more accurate than any labs I've gone. So,
Yeah.
I think that says something. And when you did my reading, it was just so accurate. Like I was shocked, and I'm just curious, and you might not know, but it's like, why do you feel like it's not widely talked about or taught? Like it's so accurate. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so I think the history of naturopathy is kind of complicated. It was really well known, and then legalities got into it. The medical schools weren't making enough money, let's just say. And then, it got pushed down into like the woo woo side, and it wasn't seen as validated. So when it had its rebirth, it dropped a lot of these practices that have been used for millennia. And iridology, I believe, is one of them. Muscle testing is still used, tongue reading, face mapping, but the eye, I guess, is just a little out there for some people, even though, like you said, it's so accurate.
Yeah.
You brought up the labs a minute ago. I can't tell you how many clients I've worked with who have said, yeah, I had a stool test and my parasite test came back negative. So, we never treated parasites. That's literally BS. For one, parasites don't come out on your poop, right? They're using your body as a fuel source. So, of course, they're not going to come out. So, being able to see exactly what's going on is so helpful. So, I really don't know why, more and more practitioners aren't picking it up.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I was shocked at, you had like multiple pages you sent me about just from my eye. Right. And I'm like, wow, this is so valuable. And I like, will go on your Instagram and like, you'll show certain things and like run to the mirror. I'm like, looking at my, my eye, it's actually really fun.
Yeah.
I am curious, like, are there any patterns that people in the audience could like look at right now that you might see like really common? They're very obvious. Like you have a different eye for it now because you like know the complexities, but are there any, like, I would love to give people something tangible, like if they looked in the mirror and like noticed a big pattern, like, is there anything you point out for people to look for?
Yeah. So one big one is called a scurf rim, and almost everybody in our modern world has it, unfortunately, due to the toxic world we live in. But if you look in the mirror and you look around your eye, and on the outside of your iris, so that colored part, if there is a darker ring around that outside, that's showing that there's a buildup of toxins in your skin and lymphatic zones. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong if you're using all clean products or using your clear stem, you're not using anything toxic, but it does mean that the toxins you have put in your body in the past, they're still stuck in there. So that's why deep cellular detoxification is so important. Another thing we can talk about is the tendencies for eye color. So when with iridology, there are some things that are tendency based, and there are some things that are, you know, can actually change in your eye. So that's what's determining exactly what's going on. But with the tendency based things, normally that's about your structure, that's about your eye color, because those aren't going to change for the most part. But with the eye colors, even though it may not be an exact prognosis, it is really accurate. For instance, with blue eyes, we know that they are genetically more prone to digestive issues. And because of that, they are going to be big mucus producers. So that could be in the intestines, but it can also be in the sinuses. They're a little bit more reactive to inflammatory foods. Their gut lining is a bit more sensitive, which can then lead to autoimmune, etc. When it comes to brown eyes, we know that they're more prone to glandular system disorders. So think about thyroid, pituitary, pancreas. Those are going to be weaker, if you will, which can allow hypothyroidism or, a calcified pituitary, if you will. Let's get into the woo.
Yeah.
So, that's a tendency for brown eyes. And then green eyes, which a little caveat, there's actually no such thing as a green eye. I have green eyes, so that's kind of weird to say, but it's actually due to pigmentation. And everybody has either blue or brown, but with different pigments. However, when it comes to green eyes, their detoxification systems are normally a lot slower. And it's because of poor enzyme production, which detoxification is run on enzymes. So, those are some things that you could point out for yourself, look in the mirror and see, what are your tendencies?
Okay, I have multiple questions. So I was gonna ask you about eye color because I know for me, I mean that makes sense what you're saying because like my eyes were blue when I was younger and then they like became green as I got older. So what causes that?
So a lot of times the blue is the pure way of thinking of it. And normally what creates that green hue is there's a buildup of either toxins or sulfur. It could be, a number of things in the digestive tract. And when that overlay is put on that blue pigmentation, it creates this green color. Now, I will say it doesn't necessarily mean you're not doing something correctly. Because, like I said, I have green eyes as well. You and I are both super cautious and aware of our health. So it's more about, the change and the adaptations that happen as we navigate through this toxic world. We can do our best, but at the end of the day, we're still going to be exposed to things. So that's what creates that green looking color.
So essentially, like if we didn't have any toxins in our environment or food system, we would only have blue and brown eyes.
Yeah.
That's wild. That's so
Right?
wild to me. Oh my gosh.
And green eyes were once incredibly rare. And even now, like people will talk about how rare green eyes are, but they're becoming more and more common. Like most
Yeah.
people I know have green eyes now. So it's not actually a genetic thing, it's about a toxicity thing.
So and that's like hazel, like the green and the brown. Wow. Well, now I feel like I'm on blast. Well, what's funny is I I've always kind of thought that my eyes were gonna turn
Mhm.
a different color. And so like it makes sense,
Yeah.
and I have had many experiences of like waking up and my eyes are completely different. And so
Mhm.
like learning about this like iridology piece, it makes sense to me, right? Or when
Mhm.
people change their diet and their eyes are just like brighter,
Yes,
clearer, like it seems like the eye can shift like really fast.
absolutely. And that's what I have clients do. Like, for instance, the scurfrim or their thing called pigments. A lot of people think of pigments as like eye freckles, but those are actually buildup of toxins that are preventing that specific organ from functioning well. But those can go away. So as we do deep cellular detoxification, heal the gut, etc., you're going to notice changes in your eye. So watch for that.
So, are there any things that you could point out related to adrenals and then parasites?
Yeah. So there are something called concentric rings, also known as nerve rings. And if you look at the eye, and there are like white circular lines around the circumference of your eye, when those are apparent, that's showing adrenal fatigue. And you can kind of think of it as your adrenals are being burnt out. Your body's pretty acidic, most likely. That's really affecting the function of your adrenals. You probably have excess cortisol, etc. So when it comes to your adrenal imbalances, look for those. Those can also go away. So if they're beginning to fade, that's a good sign. But if they're beginning to appear, definitely give your adrenals some love.
Okay, and then what about parasites?
So parasites are a fun one. So if you look at your pupil and if you see dark grooves coming out of your pupil and into the rest of your eye, almost like spokes on a wagon wheel, they can be really tall or really tiny, or they can be pretty big. Either one, that's going to show that parasites are present.